Jazzcast Pros.
Hi, Kristy.
Hi, Amanda. What you doing?
Well, actually, we're introducing our next episode.
Are we?
Mm.
Well, let's get to it then, hey?
This is our introduction for episode 6.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So, after last time, when we had the healing with Duygu, we decided to have a bit of a chat about it, didn't we?
Bit of a candid convo, I like to think of it as.
We are reflecting on Duygu's healing.
It was a monster healing. It was huge.
It was huge. Yeah, it really was. And it brought a lot up for you and I. Some of the things that we talk about are related to some of our ex relationships. And they're very, very early day relationships. They're not recent ones. But I want everybody to realize that anything that we mention that is related to abuse or gaslighting or these sort of negative things within relationships, they're things that we've had to navigate personally, and they are not things that came up at all. They were not mentioned one single time in Duygu's healing.
Correct.
I think we've got a trigger warning in there too, don't we?
And that's my job, to do the trigger warning.
Boom, boom, go.
Boom, boom. Just please be aware we talk about some heavy things, some situations in life that have come up for both of us personally, and so just have a bit of a looky around and see if it's appropriate.
Yeah.
No small kids in the car, that sort of thing. So just a bit of a heads up.
Yeah.
Cool. Should we have a listen then?
Let's do it. Welcome to The Spiritual Shortcut, the podcast to help you realize that you are in fact your own healer and that you can learn to release the invisible anchors that might have been holding you back. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Kristy.
And we'll be your guides on this journey.
For over 2 decades collectively, and honestly, probably quite a few lifetimes, we've used our deep intuitive connection and shamanic practices to help people just like you.
So let's start with some cards.
That seems like a good idea. All right.
FYI to the listeners, we got the giggles, and this is about the 5th time we've tried, so we're just going to keep going through.
That's right. So we have got a crown, so higher self and sovereignty. We have got an inverted third eye, which is false courage and bravado, and then an inverted higher heart, which is resentment.
Well, why am I not surprised?
No, we're never surprised anymore.
Yeah, that third eye inverted came up before as well, didn't it?
It absolutely did.
Yeah.
So this spread in relation to what we are actually talking about today, which is the previous podcast, where we sat with Duygu, seems very fitting, right? A lot of that was about building your life under a certain context, thinking it's going to be forever, thinking everyone has clarity about their roles and responsibilities and whatnot, and then realizing sometime down the track that is not actually correct, potentially was never correct, or people have changed their mind.
Right. And what begs the question then is, was it originally a misrepresentation, or have people changed their minds? What has occurred where people, if they've changed their minds, why are they incapable of communicating that desire? Because what brings up is that energy of feeling stuck and trapped. I've made a decision. I've made a commitment. I have to keep going with this now. I have to stay with this person. I have to stay with this family. I have, it's different with your kids, but it's still that kind of feeling, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it almost feels like it's bigger and harder to escape when there are children involved because, for eons it has been drummed into us, you stay together for the kids. And if staying together for their kids is unhealthy, which it often is, it then puts you as a mother in a bit of a predicament of,
Well, it's not even staying together for the kids as such. It's having a good grasp on the realization of, I guess, the enormity of these types of decisions. Making a change to any level of commitment when it involves multiple people is more far-reaching than just yourself or two people being involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if the situation is to the point where it's dramatically unhealthy to the point of abuse, say, for example, you aren't necessarily making a clear-cut decision of, I know what I want and I'm going to go over here and get it, and it doesn't involve you anymore. Because if within the context of a happy relationship you're being abused, what's it going to be like when you start to make noise around, I don't want this anymore?
Yeah.
Right? We know what that's like.
Which just the thought of that can generate so much fear that it becomes paralyzing to make any sort of a decision at all.
Yeah.
You know, and if we really lean into the energetics of it, the other thing is not clear cut is, you know, and as we've spoken to in previous episodes, we have worked with women coming in from DV and in situations that are less than pleasant. The layers of complexity to something like that, it's almost impossible being in it to sidetrack or push away the emotion enough to gain clarity.
Yeah. And that's if you have enough clarity to realize you lack clarity, right? That you have a deep enough awareness. And oftentimes when you're in these relationships or these situations, you don't have that awareness.
No.
You're at a point where you believe what you've been told. You believe that gaslighting. I believed that I was worthless because I was a single parent, a single mum, and I had been taken in by my ex, and he had done the bigger thing, and he convinced me that I was worthless and that I was lucky to have him.
Yeah. Which is a common story, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes one of the hooks for a lot of people and a lot of women in particular to stay. Well, I'll never get anything else better. I'll never be worth anything more than this. So, you know, and I've walked a very similar path.
Mm.
And again, with the energetics of something like this, there's lots of false guide energy. There's lots of, I want to say, being pulled at, like that sort of an energy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like as a mother, you'd be thinking, and a lot of the time I've heard a lot of people say, like, I wasn't even thinking of myself in that situation. I was only thinking of the children,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and basing my decision whether to stay or go on the children. It feels layer upon layer upon layer of complexities and inversions and all the things in a very complicated situation. But as we know, shamanic practitioners, like, there are no mistakes. It's all just lessons and learnings and wisdoms.
Yeah. The baptism, initiation by fire.
Yeah, 100%. Like, no doubt in my mind, walking the path that I have walked, in particular in a previous relationship, 100%. Like, I can't even stress that enough, that I just look at that and the things that went on, and everything in that entire container was pointing towards me standing up for myself, standing in truth, you know, expressing in truth, despite what everybody else thought, coming back to me.
Yeah. And it's full on. I remember when I left my first marriage, not even knowing what my favorite color was, what my favorite food was. I had lost me so profoundly, I did not know who I was on those kinds of levels.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's exactly what happens, what you're talking about, and how important it is to find yourself.
Yeah, and look, like I'm pausing because you've just opened up a memory for me, and I recall starting a Facebook profile because I was not allowed to have one in that situation, and being unable to put a photo of myself in the profile because I could not stand the sight of myself. Like I had fooled myself into believing that I was all of those things that someone had told me that I was. And the journey back from that has been long and at times treacherous, but it's incredible. Like you're talking about basic things that you couldn't even, most people just, it's on the tip of their tongue. Like it gets to that point.
So at this point, I want to be really, really super clear that this is not what came up in the last episode. And Duygu did not speak to any of this occurring within her relationship. But what she spoke about has brought these things up for us.
Yeah.
On a personal level. And it's what we've experienced with a lot of other clients that we have had. So, and we felt that it was important to speak to that. But yeah, I do want to make sure that it doesn't sound like we're trying to say that's what's happened with her or that she said anything about that.
Absolutely. And if we circle back around, something that we also spoke really strongly to in the messiness of, post-divorce, kids, exes, extended family, was that the remembering that it is still and always will be a reflection of what is going on internally.
Yeah. Yeah, everything. Everything always is.
Everything. And every time I think of that, even this far down the path, it stops me in my tracks. And I feel like I'm walking in the world with that level of awareness now, but it's still just my human brain just goes, that is.
Yeah. But don't get confused, because what happens is, what I've always found confusing and difficult to balance is understanding that without blaming myself. So when I came out of those sorts of relationships, I went through why did I do that? How stupid am I for getting myself into that in the first place? How did I not recognize all the red flags? So there's, what did I do to deserve it? And how am I to blame for what happened to me? Right? Versus this is a reflection of what in me needs to heal.
Yeah.
And it's really important to get that balance right, because you can't walk around blaming everybody else, but you can't walk around blaming yourself either. So both of those things, you've got to, that's the polarity, that's the pendulum swing. You've got to find somewhere to sit in the middle that works for you, where you can heal and still move forward and make the changes that you're looking for.
Yeah. So tell me then, I'm interested to hear your version of this. What is your understanding of blame, and what is your understanding of responsibility?
Part of blaming someone is handing over your power, right? It's an excuse. So if I say to someone, why didn't you do that thing that you said you were going to do, for example, right? Then they go, oh, I didn't have time because this happened and that happened and all these things. And I kind of go, oh, well, that sounds like a series of excuses. But if you really wanted to do it, so it's a handing over of power. It's giving someone else the responsibility for something that you may have done, I guess, maybe wrong, or if a mistake that you've made, that sort of thing, right? So having your own responsibility is, super important, because if you are fully taking responsibility for something, when you make a commitment to something, you are going to sit in that before you make the commitment, because you understand how much of a responsibility you're going to take for that commitment. You understand that your word is your bond, and that moving forward, if you say to someone, I'm going to do this and I am this person for the job or whatever it is, your thought process should be, now I have to do it. And if you don't really want to do it, don't commit to it.
Yeah. It was a really good answer.
Thanks. Put me on the spot.
I know. It's a big one, isn't it? It just came up while I was listening to you chat before. It's like, because it feels like two very opposing ideas, but I guess there's a lot of crossover there too.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because what else came up in that episode was the forgiveness, the feminine surrender, forgiveness for self, and allowing the resentment to dissolve through that action of forgiveness, and understanding that the decision to forgive and the ability to forgive is truly strength, right? And probably courage as well.
Yeah, this, like we said in that episode, the softness in the strength, or the strength in the softness.
Yeah, that's right. So, and I guess maybe that speaks to the difference between, I can forgive but I can't forget sort of thing. So, I don't know whether you can really do both of those things without the other, but there is a level of, well, okay, I forgive myself most of all and first of all for the things that have happened, but that doesn't mean I'm now not putting down a hard boundary.
Yeah, and we refer to that in our sessions as a boundary of light. Because once that goes down, it just, nothing in opposition to that will even come close.
Yeah.
So to have that work, you need to be in full alignment. You need your no to be so clear and so embodied, is that there's no wiggle room for anybody to try and even attempt to pull the wool over your eyes.
Yeah.
So essentially then bring it back around to the card spread, right? The resentment that is held in that heart space then is essentially blocking us from seeing that forgiveness is actually the way forward. And again, it brings me back to forgive them because they know not what they do. As humans, we're also wounded and walking around unconsciously.
And we get caught up in that emotion. And that's what holds us. There's so much energy in that, and there's a level of false power. I have no responsibility. I resent you for what you've done to me and how much it has hurt me. And I can't make any changes. So I'm just going to put all this energy out. And you get to the point where you're addicted to that energy and that emotion, but there's nothing left inside.
No. Well, it's just falsehood, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that forgiveness then becomes the key to compassionate growth and the way to move forward. And we talk about this a lot. It's the irony. It's the double-edged sword of the spiritual world where everything stands for nothing and nothing is everything kind of thing. It's to rebuild on firmer foundations that compassionate energy of forgiveness needs to be at the forefront. You need to be leading the way with that.
Yep. And forgiveness of self is the way to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. Like if you're in a bit of a, how do I say it, fixed position with someone that appears not to be doing that, it's basically the reflection that there are parts of us that we need to hone in on and figure out how can we forgive ourselves? Like what needs to happen in this situation? What does the fully healed version of myself need to do to break this apart and see what's actually underneath it? Does something need to be done? Does something need to be said? Do I have to say something to myself?
Yep.
Do I have to learn something? So, yeah, amazing.
Cool. All right.
If you are enjoying this episode, check out Declutter Empress Radio. We're talking about how to declutter as a couple without turning it into a tug of war. Whether you're merging styles, stuff, or just trying to find room for both your comfort zones, I've got you covered with simple, peaceful ways to create an oasis together. Subscribe to Declutter Empress Radio on the Jazzcast Pros Network, available right here on the podcast player you're listening to right now. New episodes every last Tuesday of the month.
Thanks for the chat.
No probs.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the latest episode of The Spiritual Shortcut.
We'll be back on the first and third Sunday of each month to unpack, demystify, and occasionally make fun of all things spiritual.
Starting with ourselves.
Of course.
Don't forget, those life blocks you've been tripping over are just poorly disguised stepping stones.
We'll support you to laugh, leap, and maybe even do a little victory dance over them.
See you soon.